If I haven't met you before, my name is Brendan Dry, and I'm the associate pastor here at Life Church. You've been hearing a lot already today about 3C friendships. And if you're here for the first time, you might be wondering, what on earth are they talking about? 3C friendships. Because we've been talking a lot about it. So let's unpack it together. I'm talking about in unison. Let's break it down. So a 3C friendship is a committed, cross-cultural, Christ-centered friendship. If you're wondering why we are talking about that, it all starts with a picture. It's a picture from the final book of the Bible, the book of Revelation. And in that picture, it's like a blanket is pulled back, or a curtain's pulled back, and we get a glimpse into heaven. And what we see there is this image of perfect peace, of perfect unity, of great joy. And it's an image of every tribe, every tongue, every nation gathered together around the throne of Jesus worshiping. That's the picture of where this is all going. That's the picture of what God wants. And the good news is that that's not only something for the end, but that's actually the world that God is making right now. Yeah. So how do we get our hands on that? If you think that's a good world, a world of more unity, a world of more peace, a world of more justice, a world of more joy, how do we get on board with that? That's a 3C friendship. We're calling it the building blocks. So a 3C friendship, it's like a digestible unit, something that we can do, something tangible and practical that we can do to actually join God in building the world that God is making right here and right now. So that's why we're talking about 3C friendships. We heard a couple weeks ago about a committed friend. And as a committed friend, it's my concern to earn your trust. That was a big idea for a committed friend. And then last week we heard about cross-cultural friendships. And as a cross-cultural friend, as I build relationships, I make it my concern to learn your story. To not make assumptions, but to get to know you for you. That's my concern as a cross-cultural friend. And today, we're talking about Christ-centered friendships. And the big idea for today is that as a Christ-centered friend, it's my concern to turn you towards Jesus. It's my concern to turn you towards Jesus. I wouldn't be standing up here without some Christ-centered friends in my life. They showed up at key moments to turn me towards Jesus. And I actually just wanted to start by telling you about one of those friends. It was honestly so fun to prepare to speak about friendship. Because thinking about your friends is one of the best things that you can do. I would just encourage you, I don't know if you do it, but honestly, just reflecting on my life and thinking about the question, who have been the Christ-centered friends in my life who have turned me towards Jesus, who have impacted my life, it's just an awesome exercise. Maybe sit down and do that this week. Actually write down, kind of chart the course of your life through your friendships. But I'm going to tell you about some friends of mine. Their names are Jim and Janet. And I met Jim and Janet in my early 20s. They led a small group that my wife and I were a part of. And what's amazing about Jim and Janet is that they were able to see something in us that we had no idea was there. And I want to tell you this because I think that this kind of encapsulates the power of what we are sent to do as Christ-centered friends for one another. So Jim and Janet, after leading a small group that we were part of for several years, hosting us in their home every week, cooking us delicious food, leading us in conversations about scripture and praying for one another, we grew a lot during that time. And eventually, after a couple of years, they sat us down and they said, hey, we're thinking about transitioning out of leading the group. And we think you would be great leaders. Now, if you knew me in my early 20s, the last thing that you probably would have thought to call me was someone who had potential to be a great leader, especially in the church. I mean, that was nowhere on my radar. I was not thinking about that for my life at that time at all. But they saw something. I thought I should call them up. I should ask them, what the heck did you see? Like, what made you say that? So they saw something in me I had no idea was there. But we trusted. We trusted what they saw. And for us, what they did was they turned us towards Jesus by calling out something that we didn't know was there, a gift we had no idea, that calling out the potential that they saw in us, and then putting us in position to begin to do it. And that moment set my life on a trajectory that leads me to standing up here today. It was those words that were spoken in that moment. I don't think Jim and Janet even knew the significance of what they were saying, but that's the power of a Christ-centered friendship. And so many C words, I'm stumbling. That's the power of a Christ-centered friendship. Because what Jim and Janet recognized, it's not just about our relationship. You know, it's not just about what they can do for us or we can do for them. They looked at us and they said, how can they be everything they are called to be? And that's what I want that's the picture I want in your mind when you think of turning towards Jesus. How can I, as a Christ-centered friend, look at you and not think of you just as my friend? But how can I look at you and see everything that God is calling you to be? Now, I'm going to get into the how. But before I do, I don't want to take anything for granted, so I want to start with the why. I want to start with what happens when we turn towards Jesus. Because this is actually the question that Jesus answered for his own disciples. Before he started talking to them about friendship, he pulled it back. And he said, here's why. Here's the why it makes such of a difference that you turn towards me. So I want you to listen to these words that Jesus shared with his disciples. He said to them, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vineyard keeper. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. A branch can't produce fruit by itself, but must remain in the vine. And likewise, you can't produce fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, and you are the branches. And if you remain in me, and I in you, then you will produce much fruit. But without me, you can't do anything. And if you don't remain in me, you'll be like a branch that is thrown out and dries up. See, everyone's a branch. God gave every single human person this amazing gift. He gave them branchness. Here's what branchness means. A branch looks like the vine. It resembles the vine, and in biblical language, we call that being created in the image of God. That's why if you are a human, any single human person who has ever lived, like you have the capacity to love and be loved. You have the capacity to be creative. You have the capacity to experience joy, to be kind. That just comes with the deal of being a branch. But not every single branch is connected to the vine. And the danger of being a lone branch, of trying to go solo, is that you're going to dry up.
Yeah, that's true.
Because eventually you're going to stop drawing from the source of life you need. And in that moment, when life puts immense pressure on you, when life is full of suffering and hardship, or when you're battling temptation, if you are not connected to the source of the life that you need, you're going to dry up.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between a branch, a fruitful branch, and an unfruitful branch? Well, it's connection to the vine. And hear this, that being connected to the vine is not just about taking the life of Jesus into you. It's literally about the life of Jesus living in you.
Yes.
That's the benefit of being connected to the vine. The life of Jesus living in you. That's where your strength comes from. That's where strength comes from, in those moments where you have reached the limits of what you are capable of. And at that moment, it makes so much difference if you have the life of Jesus living in you and through you.
Yes, sir.
And so you have a choice before you. We all have this choice. Do we want to live as a disconnected branch, knowing the danger is that we're going to dry up? Or do we want to live connected to the vine so that Jesus lives in us? And let me take it back to friendship, because as a Christ-centered friend, the greatest gift that I can give to you isn't actually my own life. Isn't the kindness I'm capable of or the hospitality that I'm capable of. The greatest gift I can give you is to turn you towards the vine so that you get to experience the life of Jesus in you and the joy of being fruitful.
Amen.
That's what I'm like. That's honestly what gets me up in the morning, is the joy of the fruit of Jesus that I see in my own life, and honestly that I see just like abounding in this place.
Yeah.
Like standing up here, this is my favorite, this is why I like to preach. It's not because I like to hear myself talk. I like to just look at you while I'm talking. Because I'm looking out here and I see all these branches just dripping with fruit. This place, we got people who are full of Jesus. And this is an amazing place to be. And so I want you to hold that image in your head as we think about Christ-centered friends, that the greatest gift that I can give you, it's not myself, it's not what I'm capable of, even if I'm the best friend in the world. The best gift that I can give you is to constantly turn you towards the vine so that you can draw from the life of Jesus and Jesus can live in you so that your joy may be complete.
Yes.
That's what Jesus tells us. So your joy may be complete. Okay, let's get into the how. I want to talk about 3 attitudes of a Christ-centered friend. And we're going to keep following Jesus in these last remarks that he makes to his disciples. So I'm going to share a few words that Jesus shares with his friends. And the first attitude of a Christ-centered friend is that I am willing to share. A Christ-centered friend is willing to share. Jesus tells his disciples that I don't call you servants any longer, because servants, they don't know what their master is doing. Instead, I call you friends. Yeah. Because everything I heard from my Father, I have made known to you. Everything I heard from my Father, I have made known to you. We're going to give some context here for what's happening. So Jesus, his relationship to his disciples is actually not something that he invented. Jesus was a Jewish teacher, a rabbi. And so in a lot of ways, his relationship to his disciples kind of fit the pattern of how rabbis related to their students. Some of y'all are teachers, and you have students, and you know that in that kind of a relationship, it actually makes a lot of sense that there's a hierarchy of authority. Because if there is no power differential between teachers and their students, the classroom would be chaos. In our culture, if there are different levels of authority, it is appropriate that there are different levels of access to information. Now, I think about one of my first jobs out of college, I sat right down the hall from my boss. And from where I sat, I could always see her door, and I knew that when the door was open, that meant that I had access. I could come in, I could ask questions, I could just catch up about what was going on. Sometimes the door was closed. And when the door was closed, it meant that there were conversations happening behind the door that I didn't need to have access to. And that was well within her right, and actually it was good for the organization that not every single employee had access to the information that she had. So as people in positions of authority, we know sometimes it's appropriate that you don't reveal everything you know. And this is why the shift is so remarkable that Jesus is making here. See, Jesus had very little material wealth. He had very little social capital. He was not particularly well thought of by the people in power. So what Jesus possessed, the most valuable thing Jesus possessed, was his capacity to fully reveal who God was. Yeah. His relationship to the Father, that was the most valuable thing that Jesus possessed. And Jesus was willing to put the most valuable thing he possessed fully on the line for the sake of his disciples. Yeah. He says, I am holding nothing back, even though it is within my right as someone in authority. I'm holding nothing back from you. Everything that I hear, everything I know about the Father, I have made known to you. That's what makes a friend. Yeah. It's a question of access. You have full access to me as my friend. I hold nothing back from you. And remember, we talked about when we're connected to the vine, how the life of Jesus lives in us. And so when you give your friends access to you as a Christ-centered friend, what you are actually giving them access to is to Jesus living in you.
Yeah.
That's why the open door is so powerful, and that's what Jesus did to his disciples. They were constantly asking, Lord, show us the Father. Show us God, Jesus. And Jesus saying, you don't get it.
Yeah.
I'm here.
That's right.
You have seen him. I am holding nothing back from you. God is holding nothing back from you. I am here.
Yes. Good.
Some of us have a tendency to close the door on our friends. That's the danger. Sometimes it's for good reason. Like we close the door around some things in our life because we're trying to protect ourselves. And I get that. I have some closed doors in me that protect some things that I'm kind of scared of. Things that I'm nervous if people knew them about me. What would they think of me? But that's the difference between a friend and a servant, according to Jesus, is access. And because if we are connected to the vine, if we have Christ at the center of our lives, giving friends access to us gives access to Jesus in us, and that's a way that we turn people towards Jesus. And so I want to give you 3 pictures to think about. I want you to picture the open door. I want you to picture the open book. And I want you to picture open hands. I'm going to give you 3 questions to go along with these 3 pictures. The open door. Am I willing to share my space and my time? Man, especially that time one. Talk about something that we have that we perceive of great value to us. Am I willing to share access to my time? An open book. Am I willing to share my story?
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite Psalms in the Bible, Psalm 40. And it talks about God's rescue, pulling us out of the pit, setting us on solid ground, putting a song in our mouth. And then the psalmist says this, when I sing the song, people hear it, and they're amazed, and when they hear the song, they trust the Lord.
Yeah.
So when they hear your story,
Yes.
they trust the Lord.
Yeah.
That is powerful. But I am convicted because I have friends who honestly I pray for that. I pray that they come to know Jesus. But I realized as I was preparing this message, too often I close the door around my story. Too often I close the door on my testimony. I don't speak freely about what God has done in my life. And so I'm like, I want to commit to that. When they ask how I'm doing, I want to be able, I want to have the words of my testimony on my lips so I can say, how am I doing? This is what God has done in my life. The open book, are you willing to share your story? And then open hands, am I willing to share the resources that God has given me? Be willing to share, the first attitude. Second attitude of a Christ-centered friend, be determined to forgive. Jesus, try to get with me in this scene right now, because Jesus is sitting here, he's in front of his disciples, and he just told them, I don't call you servants anymore, I call you friends. And he repeats that again, you're my friends, I love you. These are like incredible words of love from Jesus. And he's sitting there looking at people that he knows in less than 24 hours, when they have an opportunity to stand up and identify as friends of Jesus, they're literally going to deny that they even know him. Whew.
Wow.
That takes the life of Jesus in you to be able to sit in front of someone you know is going to stab you in the back and say, you are my brother, you're my sister, you're my friend.
Yeah.
Forgiveness is just so central to who Jesus is. And that's good because it's part of every human relationship.
That's right.
And if our relationships were contingent on the way that we perform for one another, we would be in big trouble. Let me tell you a secret. Even Christians, even Christ-centered friends, we let each other down.
That's right. Amen.
We're going to fail to show up for each other. I'm going to fail to show up for you. I'm going to just let the cat out of the bag right now. As I know you, as I get closer to you, you're going to be disappointed in me. That's a part of every single human relationship. But Jesus, because his friendship with his disciples isn't contingent on their performance, he can say things like, you didn't choose me, I chose you. That's the foundation for Jesus' friendship with his disciples, and it's actually the foundation for forgiveness, because it expresses a level of commitment that's not based on performance, but is based on Jesus' commitment to them as his friends. And what forgiveness does, and we're going to look at a scene in just a second, forgiveness sees in others their potential instead of their pitfalls.
Yeah.
So look at me with this scene, and I'm going to unpack this for a minute. So this is a scene between Jesus and the disciple Peter, right after the resurrection, right after Jesus comes back from the dead. And let me take you there. It says that they're sharing a meal together. Scripture starts, when they had finished eating. What was that meal like? Talk about an elephant in the room. So Jesus, I didn't expect to see you again. You know that thing that happened? I didn't mean it. When they had finished eating, though, Jesus asked Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? And Simon, that's another name for Peter, he says, yes, Lord, you know I love you. And Jesus said to him again, feed my lambs. And so he asked a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Simon replied, yes, Lord, you know I love you. So Jesus said to him, take care of my sheep. And he asked a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was sad that Jesus asked him a third time, do you love me? But he replied, Lord, you know everything, and you know I love you. So Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. This is a forgiveness scene. Even though there's no apology made, no obvious repentance, Jesus doesn't say the words, I forgive you. Those are normal things that we think about with forgiveness, right? So let's look at what's actually happening here. So there's this odd exchange, right, where Jesus asked Peter to say three times, he asked him three times, do you love me? And I don't think Jesus is like trying to rub it in. You know, I don't think he's trying to hold something over Peter's head. But I think what Jesus is doing is he's giving Peter another chance. Yeah. He says, Peter, I'm going to give you a chance to say what I know you wanted to say when you were under pressure. You caved then, but I'm going to give you a second chance because Jesus knew Peter's heart. And if Jesus had looked at Peter and had seen only the mistake, he would have treated him so differently, but he didn't. He saw the potential in Peter, and so he said, feed my lambs, take care of my sheep. In other words, continue the work. Yeah. You blew it, but that mistake isn't how I see you. Yeah. I see you for your potential. And so I'm still trusting you with the work that I have given to you. This is why I think forgiveness is so powerful in turning people towards Jesus, because when we forgive someone, we're saying to them, not only do I not hold it against you, what you did, but it hasn't compromised the way that I look at you. Like, I still see you for the best of you. When I look at you, I don't see the mistake that you made. And that can be the temptation, right? If someone hurts us, or even if we've hurt somebody, is to see ourselves or to see another person primarily for the mistake. But forgiveness releases us from that. It gives us the vision, the clarity to see somebody for the best of who they are. And so when you practice forgiveness, you are literally showing somebody how Jesus looks at them.
Yeah, that's good.
Jesus hasn't given up on you. Jesus sees the best in you, and that's how forgiveness can turn somebody towards Jesus. And I want to say something specific, especially building off of the cross-cultural sermon last week. There's this thing that happens in our brains. It's called a bias. And what bias does to our brains is it makes it easy for us to assume the best about people who look like us. It's just more natural for us. People who are in our tribe, people who we feel comfortable with, it's easier to see the best in them. But the dangerous thing about bias is that if someone who doesn't look like us, if we have a negative interaction, if they offend us, or if we say something offensive, the temptation is to take that interaction and assume that everybody who looks like them is like that.
Right.
That's the insidiousness of bias. And so in that context where we're talking about building cross-cultural friendships, I think it has to be said that the power of forgiveness is it can free us from that tunnel vision of looking at others who are not like us and assuming, oh, well, I had an interaction with someone who looks like you, so you must be like that. That's why forgiveness can be so powerful, specifically when we're working on cross-cultural relationships. Our eyes can mislead us, bias can cause us to make assumptions, but forgiveness gives us clarity. The third attitude of a Christ-centered friend is to be intentional to encourage growth. Jesus continues with his disciples. He tells them that I chose you and appointed you so that you could go and produce fruit, and so that your fruit could last. So that. This is what I want you to remember from this section. Let's say it together. So that.
So that.
Christ-centered friends are so that friends. Anybody ever come up to you, someone you didn't know, and said, hey, I would really love to be your friend, but you should know going into this that I've got an agenda. You'd be like, well, that doesn't sound much like a friend. Coming at me with your agenda. I'm not trying to reclaim the word agenda, but what I do want to reclaim is that as a Christ-centered friend, there is a so that to our friendship.
Yeah.
There's purpose. And we can be upfront about that because Jesus was intentional with his disciples at all times, not only to love them, but to literally break it down, explain it to them. Here's what I'm doing. Here's why I'm doing it. When I wash your feet, I want you to experience it, but then to know I'm doing it so that you go and do it to each other. He was a so that kind of friend. And so that what that means is, as a Christ-centered friend, I'm interested in your growth. I want you to flourish. That's my agenda. That's my purpose for this friendship. And so if I see something in your life that is keeping you back, I'm going to have to say something. I can't just tolerate it because I'm a so that kind of friend, because there's so much more for you. If you grow, if you stay connected to the vine, there is fruit that is ready to be produced in your life. And that's my agenda, to bring that out in you. So I want to show you a chart real quick. This is a weird section, I know, because I'm talking about having agendas in friendships, and now I'm going to give you a chart that explains how to be a friend. Hang with me. This is a really simple chart that my mom actually shared with me, so you know it's good, because it came from my mom. It's from a larger book, in a kind of a theory of growth that was written by this guy, Mike Breen, and the system is called 3DM. Gosh, threes everywhere. I don't know what 3DM stands for, to be honest with you. So I'm taking this a little out of context. But I think there's a really powerful idea here. So he basically argues that for there to be growth, there needs to be two things in place. There needs to be high invitation and high challenge. In invitation, those are the things that, honestly, most of us are really good with our friends. It's like hanging out, building relationship, building trust, building connection, having fun, laughing together. Like getting coffee. High invitation, lots of invitation, because invitation earns you the ability to also have high challenge. And he uses this to talk about the cultures of churches, but I actually think it's so brilliant. I love it for individual relationships. It helps me think about, as a Christ-centered friend, my priority for you, to turn you towards Jesus, I need to be high on invitation. I need to be spending time with you. I need to be connecting with you. But I also need the courage to be a high challenger. And I am not a challenger. Like, that is so foreign to who I am. I get scared. I get scared around that. And I'm wondering if any of you are like that too. I know not all of you are. because I know we got some challengers in here. But listen to this. So I'm kind of coming back to the vine. How do we remain in Jesus so that we bear the fruit of Jesus' love for others? This will make sense in a second. It's not a feeling. It's actually obedience. Jesus says this. He says, "As the Father loved me, I too have loved you. Remain in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will remain in my love, just as I kept my Father's commandments and so remain in his love." This is why we need challenge. Because to stay connected to the vine so that the life of Jesus can live in us and so that we produce the fruit of Jesus' love for others, we have a job to do.
Yeah.
And it's a really, really hard job. Being obedient to Jesus in 21st century America, it is a hard job. It's a high call. There are so many voices pulling us away from the message of how Jesus wants us to live. So many voices encouraging us to care about ourselves, to put ourselves first. So many voices that are trying to disrupt our capacity to live obediently to Jesus. And so this is why we need each other as Christ-centered friends, because we believe your obedience to Jesus is the best thing for you. That will produce the life of Jesus in you. And so as a Christ-centered friend, I want to keep you on the path. I think about a friend of mine. He took this risk to try to introduce a little bit of challenge into my friend circle. And we were really good at the invitational parts. My friends and I, we spent a lot of time hanging out together. And one day, my friend, he came to our group and he said, "Hey, what would you think if once a week we got together and we actually just confessed our sins to one another?" It's like one of those things that, yeah, you probably should do that, but no thanks. Why don't we go play volleyball instead? That was a courageous thing to do. That was not a part of the culture of our friends, but it transformed the dynamic of those relationships. And some of you have experienced that, because there's something that feels intuitive to us that if I challenge someone or if I introduce something that's uncomfortable, that's going to damage the relationship, but it's the opposite. Challenge actually produces a greater depth. It's because it's such an essential part of what it means to be a Christ-centered friend, to turn one another towards Jesus. And if challenge is intimidating, like it is for me, you can start like my friend did, which was just make space. He wasn't there. He wasn't trying to call every single person out. That's not what he was trying to do. But he made a space. And in that space, I believe what happened was the Spirit of God showed up because that's what we needed to grow.
Yeah.
So start by making space. I'm going to go ahead and invite the band to come forward as I wrap up here. We've shared that the goal for us as a church, and I hope that you take this seriously. I hope that you join this movement here with us. Our goal is to build one more 3C friendship this year. And as you work on building one more 3C friendship, I just want to tell you, it is never too early just to start being a Christ-centered friend or to grow as a Christ-centered friend. So I wanted to make sure that I at least give some really practical things that you could do. Going out from here today, even this week, to live as a Christ-centered friend, to turn others towards Jesus, to help them connect to the vine, the source of the life that your friends need. So here's 4 things that you can do, practical things. The first is this: choose a friend, sit down, and make a list of all of the things that they're good at. Write down their gifts. If that's a weird word, just write down, what do you see about this friend that you think they're good at? And then tell them. That'll be transformative. That happens so rarely that somebody who knows you sits in front of you and says, for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to tell you what you're good at. And the reason I'm going to do that is so that you can do more of it. That's what my friends Jim and Janet did to me. Like I said, I didn't know what they were talking about. They saw something in me I didn't know was there. And that is an amazing experience to be able to give that to somebody, to be able to sit with someone and encourage them and say, I see this in you. God put this in here. Do it. Do more of it. So make that list. Tell your friends what they're good at. The second thing you can do is to tell a friend the testimony. That's what I'm going to do this week. For some of those friends who I pray for routinely, especially some friends who I know are not following Jesus, and I really long to see them follow Jesus, I'm going to ask them, hey, would you mind if I just shared some of my story with you? Can I share with you about some of the things that God has done in my life? Or can I share with you about why I'm a follower of Jesus? That could be a turning point in the relationship, because I really believe that telling our story, sharing our testimony, that's a way that we give people access to Jesus living in us. So that's a practical thing you can do. Choose a friend and just create some time, set some time up to share your story with them. Tell a friend that you forgive them. And before you go into that, if there's a relationship that needs some repair work, maybe take the time to actually think through, what is the best of this person? Make another list. Who is this person at their best? Because if I'm going to go into a conversation where I'm going to try to address a mistake that they made, I want to go in armed with the knowledge of who this person is at their best. In the way that Jesus saw Peter for who he was at his best. Approach forgiveness with that in mind. And then the last one, just commit to prayer and then tell your friends you're praying for. I got a text from someone the other day, and it was a little bit out of the blue, but they said, hey, I'm just letting you know I'm praying for you today. Whew. It was like God just used those words to lift something in me, to pick me up when I was feeling low. Tell a friend that you're praying for him. So I hope those are practical things. And if you hear the message today and you say, I want to be more of a Christ-centered friend, how do I get started? Here's a place to start. And if you're here and you're thinking, I want to be a Christ-centered friend, but I don't know if I can because I don't know if I'm connected to Christ. This is how I want to close today. I just want to make an invitation. I want you to hold that image in your brain of the vine and the branch. Because you can make a go of it as a branch. You can. You can live your whole life as a branch. But there's something on the table that I just want to encourage you to consider. That what Jesus offers is his own life, the life of God, the indestructible, the all-powerful, the overflowing life of God. It's on the table for you, if you want it. And the way to start with that is a prayer of saying, Jesus, I want to connect to the vine today. I don't want to be a lone branch. Plug me in. I want your life to live in me. And if you're making that choice today, or if you just want prayer for anything, we have people who are ready to pray for you right over here after the service. And we have on our connection card space to indicate that you're making that choice today to be more connected, to turn towards Jesus, be connected to the life of Jesus in you. Amen.